Today we we are meeting to deal with the Division of Revenue bill. The presentation will be made by a PBO. So let me welcome the director, Dr. Janchis, and the PBO team who are going to take us to today's presentation. So I think this is our way of starting the meeting. Darren, can I check, are there any apologies?
Good morning, Chairperson, honorable members and guests. No, we haven't received any apologies for today's meeting. However, I just received a message from Mr. Matafa. He is struggling to join the meeting. I will just try and assist him now once the PBO starts with their presentation.
Okay. Please attend. Please attend to Mr. Matafa. Once again, thank you so much, honorable members. Dr. Janchis, please take us through a presentation. With your team, you'll bring back the meeting to me once you are done with your presentations. As you know, after that, you'll then engage with your presentation, allow you an opportunity to respond to those issues that would have been raised by the honorable members. Just to go one step back, honorable members, you remember that the Minister of Finance presented a budget to Parliament, and then what the process is thereafter is that the Standing Committee on Finance deals with the fiscal framework, and then from our side, Standing Committee on Appropriations, we deal with the Division of Revenue bill. So that's the process now. The fiscal framework will be debated in the National Assembly, after which the Division of Revenue bill will also be debated in the National Assembly. From the National Assembly, both bills go to the NCOP, and they go through the same process. Standing Committee and the select committees, Appropriations and Finance. Yeah. Dr. Janchis, let's go.
Good morning, Chairperson. Good morning, honorable members, and good morning, colleagues. Thank you so much for the opportunity for us to brief the committee in this regard. I'm with the team chair and members will go through the presentation, and then we'll wait for the comments from members. Thank you once more for the opportunity. I don't know who's sharing the slides. Darren, are you tracking our slides? Nelia, are you on the platform? Who's sharing the slides?
Dr. Janchis, no, I'm not sharing from my side. I've made you a co-host, I've made Nelia a co-host, and I've made Rashad Amra a co-host. So you can decide who's going to share it.
Okay. Okay, Nelia, do you want to reflect the slides? But in the meantime, while Nelia and Rashad...
Doctor, I'm not set up to, and we also might have load shedding.
The load shedding issue. Rashad, are you able to reflect the slides? I do apologize about that, Chairperson, members.
No,
Darren,
I'm not
can you forward the
to
slides, Darren, to reflect them? Because there's issue of load shedding that we have here, which we want to manage that. Can you send them to you, Darren? Media, send Darren the PowerPoint slides so that she can reflect them. But in the meantime, can I just continue on the introduction? Darren, are you able to show the slides for us?
I guess I don't have a choice. However, Chairperson, I was going to help Mr. Matafa now, but if I'm going to share the slides, and I won't be able to assist him.
Load sharing. I'm just thinking who can. Where's Siraj? Siraj, are you able to show the slides? What we'll do is that Lilia, please deal with the slides sharing. I understand the members have the copies. In the meantime, I'll continue while Lilia is dealing with the slides. Chair, I do apologize about that.
Doc, I'm just listening on this thing. I think there's a lot of confusion. These things should be sorted out even before we start our meetings.
Absolutely.
I don't think it's correct that now we are busy saying who's going to share a slide and so on. For me, those are just the givens. Can we then sort that one out? I'm adjourning the meeting for 5 minutes, and while we are clearing, we're sorting out the slides thing. Okay, thank you. Honorable members, I think at least we do have a slide now. Can we continue with the presentation? Are we all back? Honorable Sheikh. Honorable Sheikh, there. Honorable Kaiso.
Yes, Chair, I'm back.
Okay, good.
Other members, they are having serious connection problem, Chair. Honorable Matafa and Honorable Clara.
Yeah.
Lenzana is in, but is also challenged by load shedding.
You know where you are, Honorable Lenzana, I can hear you very well. So don't move. Honorable Sarupen, are you in? Okay, that's fine. I see Honorable Matafa is in. I take it that all the honorable members are in now. And I think we can proceed. Yeah, we know the challenge of load shedding today. Doc, can you please continue?
Thank you so much, Chairperson. And we do apologize. I think the load shedding threw us off completely this morning. We do apologize about it. This is an outline of our presentation as it is. I'm with the team on the platform who will take the committee through the presentation. The next slide, I think this is our regular introduction slide. The next slide, please. But I think just want to emphasize that, we see our purpose really to support the committees in concerning these budget instruments, and this analysis really tries to really give input to the committee for consideration in these budget instruments. And clearly, these are some of the main focus areas that we'll be looking at looking at different role players within the DORA value chain system, and also emphasize some of the areas that the budget attempts to deal with society, but also reflect on some of the changes over the years, also over the MTF, both the local government and the provincial sector. Next slide. I think just to give quick background on that, we try to emphasize to the committees that this process is set up in the constitution of dividing this budget in terms of the revenue in terms of these spheres, and also want to emphasize some of the key principles, some of the key considerations that are taken into account in the process. And clearly, some becomes more important over the others. We see when the allocation takes place. And in one instances, what we have seen over time, it's that the developmental needs have left quite a bit in some of the areas, trying to balance other aspects. I think what we see as importance of this principles up here is just to really, members to really look at what are some of the priorities that are set out when the division of revenue is set out, and which are those have been left behind, or which of those have been given more priorities over the other. The next slide. This just emphasizes the main objective here of the DORA is to really divide the revenue in the spheres, but also showing each province, each of the shares, and also highlighting some of the constitutional grants allocated to different spheres from the national government, and also some of the key responsibilities by all the spheres given the allocated budgets that are set out. So it's not really a rent and cents exercise. In our perspective, really what has this allocated or divided revenue has to be used for by the spheres as set out in the Constitution. The next slide. I think in the next slide, what we're emphasizing or raising to the committees is the recognition that this DORA is a value chain system, and that different role players within the value chain, and it's important to know which role comes when and what are some of the various stakeholders' roles in the value chain, and who has to be held accountable. I think it's important that to recognize that Parliament really sits as important at the heart of the whole process, given that it in a way there is a role to play to facilitate different role players, stakeholders in the process, looking at the linkage with the society, with our constituencies, various sectors of society, and really in a way of understanding how has this budget been used to realize the aspirations of constitutions, how has this budget been used to realize the aspirations set out by various policy prerogatives. Parliament relies on various stakeholders, relies on AG's reports in really assessing whether some of these requirements have been realized, or aspirations have been realized, and which also relies a lot on the reports produced in line with the prescripts set out by the National Treasury. But also, there's a role played by monitoring evaluation over time, which becomes also important for the committees of Parliament to use as a mechanism to assess whether this budget has indeed been used to realize these aspirations. So we want to emphasize the value chain in the process, understand different role players playing in ensuring at the end of the day the aspirations of constitutions and various policy documentation developments are realized used by this budget. This is really the important role I want to emphasize in this slide. The last slide is just to also emphasize different spheres, main responsibilities, or legislative mandates that are out in the Constitution and other legal prescripts, which in way this divided revenue is meant to enable them to realize those responsibilities over time. There are obviously some of the core shared functions between the local and provinces, but fundamentally, basic education, healthcare, roads and housing, and those other social development are the prerogative of the provincial spheres, and water and sanitation, electricity, education, roads and community services, largely say with the provincial local government, and those other centralized ones are within the national main sphere, which the division of revenue is meant to realize those processes. The last slide on the background really is just to show how this 2022 division revenue has played out, or just to describe it, shows that 49.7% is allocated to national and 9.1% to local sphere. But also within the local sphere, you realize that the almost a third of it goes to conditional grants, and 10% goes to the general fuel levy. The provinces, again, the conditional grant also plays quite a bit, but large of it comes from the equitable shares. And certainly this bodes back to those responsibilities set out in the previous slide. Chairperson, thank you so much. And members, I'll give to Ms. Lucy West to take us through some of the understanding of the needs that are meant to be realized by this allocation of revenue, division of revenue. Thank you so much. Lucy, you will take through.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
Good morning, honorable members, guests and colleagues. Can I please have the next slide? I'll be taking us through the needs analysis that the PBO has conducted, as Dr. Jantis has already mentioned. So starting off to talk about the national sphere of government and understanding the national sphere of government as being critical for social protection and safety and security. These are the two largest expenditure functions at the national level. And this includes, of course, social protection and social welfare that supports women, youth, and persons with disabilities. Excluding the special COVID-19 social relief of distress grant, on average, 18.3 million South Africans receive one or another form of a social grant. And of course, this has to be understood within a context of deepening inequality, poverty, and high levels of unemployment. At the end of 2021, there were 18.4 million social grants paid to 11 million beneficiaries. And of course, as we know, the COVID SRD has been extended as well. So we know that in this context, and about 13.2 million people will be eligible to receive this. And again, like I mentioned, we have to understand this within this context of just deepening income inequality as well. And so during the September 2021, there were 13.7 million applications for the second phase of the COVID-19 SRD, of which 8.8 million applications were approved, 7.4 million grants were paid, and 69,000 about applications were received from SLM seekers. Next slide, please. Of course, we understand that, there's been great needs in our economy, but of course, the economic impacts of corruption in the public and private sectors, cannot be left aside. These are critical and in what is happening in our context and understanding the ways in which we are able to meet the needs of the majority. The COVID-19 pandemic has also heightened the vulnerability of certain groups that are exposed to gender-based violence, in particular, and femicide. Of course, women and children being disproportionately impacted by this. Between the 3 months from July 2021 to the end of September 2021, 9.5 thousand people were raped, 72,000 cases of common assault and assault previous bodily harm were opened with the police. 6,000 people were murdered, and this is higher than in the same period before in the previous financial year. And there were about close to 30,000 cases of contact-related crimes. So safety remains a critical concern in our society, and thinking about the national sphere of government and how it helps alleviate some of these issues. Next slide, please. Okay, so at the provincial level, of course, we understand that education and health are the most critical and are the largest expenditure functions at this level. We know that children, 3.2 million children between 0 and 4 accessed early childhood development services by March 2021. This is, almost reaching our target of 3.6 million children that we hope to have access to ECD services by 2024. And of of course, we always have to think about population growth in this context in terms of our targets as well. We know that enrollment of children aged 5 to 6 years in school or ECD centers has grown, which is a positive factor in our economy, thinking about the long-term and longevity of those multipliers of expenditure in particular. In terms of the International Mathematics and Science Study, results show that grade 5 scores achieved are 374 and 324 for maths and science respectively. Math results show a slight drop from 2015. So this is, of course, a concern when over time our results are going backwards as opposed to getting better. And of course, this is something that we'll have to work towards. And in the previous presentation, we'd spoken about how budget cuts in the education sector do impact class sizes, and so something to think about as well. And in terms of children achieving 60% or above in maths and science in grade 12, the 2020 results show that 13.2% and 15.3% are what 15.3% are what we're actually achieving. So we need to really work on those statistics and numbers in terms of outcomes. Next slide, please. In terms of the average life expectancy in South Africa, it was 65.5 years in 2020. The MTSF target is 70 by 2030. So, we are moving towards that, and it is slowly improving, but something to certainly keep in mind when thinking about plans for expenditure. The child indicators show that the infant mortality rate has actually increased. And so this is something to also be concerned about. Compared to 2019, there were 22.1 per thousand, deaths, and now we're at 23.6 as of 2020. The under 5 mortality rate was 34.1 deaths per 1,000 live births in 2020, which is actually higher than 2019. So again, when we see over time these statistics worsening, it is something to be concerned about. Next slide, please. I will now hand over to my colleague, Tshepo Moloi, to take us through the local government.
Thank you very much, Lucy. Chairperson, honorable members, I'm trying to, I see my videos upside down. But yeah, thank you, Busi. Chairperson, honorable members, I'll be taking you briefly through the slides on local government, which we all know plays a critical role as the first line of interaction between government and its citizens. Now, between 2004 and 2016, the country has seen a rapid rise in service delivery protests owing to... Chairperson?
Let's get the video correct. You are on your head. Still, okay. Let's get that one correct.
My apologies, Chair.
Yeah.
Is it better now, Chair?
Yeah, that's how it should look. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair. I was mentioning that between 2004 and 2016, the country has seen a rapid rise in service delivery protests, and this has been as a result of the dissatisfaction with poor service delivery. We also know that this poor service delivery also has a disproportional impact on different households along gender, racial, and geographic lines. Likewise, COVID-19 has also brought to the fore the centrality of social reproduction. This relates to household duties often undertaken by women and girls, things such as cooking, cleaning, childcare, adult care, and to some extent, part of this is also exacerbated somewhat by the lack of access to basic services. Moreover, we also know that these vital households are regarded as unpaid work and not measured in indicators such as GDP, meaning that poor service delivery means more time for these women and girls doing unpaid work, and thus ultimately affects women's labor market participation. Next slide, please. Now, the statistics contained in the 2019 non-financial census of municipality report all points to a significant decline in the provision of free basic services, be it when you look at access to free basic water, sewage, sanitation, as well as electricity services. At the same time, we also know that millions of South Africans or households are faced with this trade-off between being able to afford food and paying for the ever-increasing municipal services. Now, interesting research from the Public Affairs Research Institutes makes two important findings. The first being that over more than 2 decades, local government has not been able to fulfill its conflicting objectives. On one end of being able to charge affordable tariffs to ensure universal affordable access to quality services, whilst at the same time still ensuring that they remain financially viable. The second key finding was that millions of households that are eligible for free services do not get them simply due to a dysfunctional system, particularly as it relates to the registration of indigent households. Next slide, please. Now, this next slide simply looks at the challenges to service delivery more broadly. And here we're simply saying that the financial and operational challenges that hinder local government from delivering their basic services are often correlated or closely related, and that the failure to adequately address these challenges causes immense hardships, not only for citizens, but also has a detrimental impact as it relates to social and economic development. Now, much of the literature on local government suggests that the poor performance in local government can be attributed to a number of factors. Along these are the capacity constraints, poor planning, ineffective financial management, inadequate monitoring and evaluation, particularly in the context of poor governance, convoluted political processes, and corruption. I guess the last 2 lines has to do mainly with the lack of consequence management that we also see in local government. Now, linked to this is also an important point about the lack of up-to-date data. In fact, you'd recall in 2021, Stats SA indicating that the detailed household survey has been suspended. The general household survey had to be suspended due to the budget cuts. Now, without this critical information, certainly data-driven policymaking will certainly be undermined. Then finally, when you also look at the performance and financial information or audits from the Auditor General, those also point to serious service delivery problems within local government. Their latest reports points to the fact that only 28% of municipalities submitted credible financial statements for audit in the financial year 2019-20. They also report that the number of municipalities in financial distress has risen from 86 in 2013-14 to 175 in 2019-20. And even more worrying was that at the beginning of the 2019-20 financial year, about 123 municipalities passed unfunded budgets. Thank you, Chairperson. I'll hand over to Melia, to Rashad to discuss the division of revenue.
Thank you very much. Honorable members, as noted earlier on, we spoke about the constitutional requirement for the division of revenue between the 3 spheres of government. And given that these different constitutional requirements are there in terms of mandates and the limitations and the imposed by the intergovernmental fiscal system, we also noted for the division of revenue, we presented the current, over the current MTEF. So it's actually quite useful for us to go back, given the socioeconomic needs of the country that has been discussed earlier on, to look at a longer timeline, right? To look at the concerns over a longer period to see where we're coming from, to essentially to contextualize the division of revenue. So what we have in front of you is the division of revenue, at least the 3 spheres of government from 2008-9 up until the end of the current MTEF. And what it shows over here is essentially declining allocation. You may see marginal for national and for provincial government, and an increase, a marginal increase over this period from 2008-9 to 24-25 for local government. Why this is important is if you look at the cumulative effects of declining shares over time with no real change in the mandate and no significant change in the models of service delivery, one can expect there to be a decline in in service delivery if it's not met by a concomitant change in efficiency and effectiveness of spending from those particular spheres. So it's important to look at this over a period of time and see how these shares are declining, specifically for national and provincial. Excuse me. So was that an intervention from the chair?
No.
Continue, Rashad.
Okay, thank you. I heard something on my side. And this is also made worse by the fact that the size of the pie, if you want to call it that, of the division of revenue, the growth has been slowing over the past several years, in part because of fiscal consolidation required to arrest some of the current trajectories. And so this may also ask questions about the adequacy, and it also asks questions about the intergovernmental fiscal relation system that we have in our country, where a lot of responsibility is conferred on local government, but at the same time, local government has the potential, at least constitutional potential, and higher degrees of independence to raise its own revenue. However, its allocation is increasing over time. Next slide, please. This is similar to the previous slide showing division of revenue with the three spheres. However, it makes a very important inclusion, and that's the red line over there. Now, when we include debt service costs, we see a markedly different picture over here. So debt service costs are 9% of main budget spending in 2008-2009, and that's expected to almost double by 2024-25. That's the outer year of the current MTEF. Now, what that's quite important is because given that this is expressed as a share of total spending, for one item to increase, one or two other items or more may need to decrease in terms of their share. And it's quite clear over here that the decline in terms of allocation as a share of total spending has been from national and provincial, whilst local government continues to increase over this long period of time over here. Now, again, this is something that government has noted. Government has referred to this as the crowding out of other expenditure areas because of debt service costs. And indeed, the country's fiscal policy over the past 5 to 6 years has been fiscal consolidation, trying to decrease the allocation to debt service costs through stabilizing as debt as a share of GDP. Now, whilst this is a stated objective and would allow for a more favorable division of revenue over the medium term, what has happened over the past several years is provincial governments and national governments have had to find ways of absorbing the decreasing allocation as a share of total spending. Next slide, please. And lastly, what this shows is the allocation per capita in real constant 2010 rands. What this essentially means is how much is government allocating per person in the country and removing the effect of inflation over this period presented in front of you. And so we look at that. Now, what's important to note over here is the orange line on top. Now, the amount the country is spending per person in the country has actually increased over the past 12 to 13 years, and for the most part is expected to continue increasing. So whilst we may talk about declining allocation per person in different specific budget votes and on a per capita basis when it comes to economic classification, overall the actual allocation is increasing. But the devil, as they say, is in the details. So when we look at the graph, we look at the table beneath the graph, what we see is the overall main budget expenditure between 2008-9 to last financial year has actually increased on a per capita basis. So in real terms, we're spending more per citizen or per person in the country. However, the largest growth in that spending has been in debt service costs, followed by local government, followed by national, and then provincial. So provincial, and as you will hear soon in the discussion on the appropriations bill, a lot of it goes to salaries. Now, if you're restricting growth over there, and the implication is a lot of the allocation is to salaries, then obviously you're cutting back on other important service delivery areas. And again, debt service costs consume the largest share of that growth in that period, leaving not a lot for other important expenditure areas. If we look at the bottom right-hand corner of that table over there, it shows us the expected growth in spending over the MTEF. And over here, in contrast to the previous period, the main budget expenditure is expected to contract on a per capita basis. Again, as noted above, implications for service delivery. And again, 6.1% increase in debt service costs over that period in terms of per capita allocation. So our growth in spending is far faster when it comes to debt service costs per citizen in the country compared with local government, which still grows quite fast. And the concerning part over there is if you look at national departments and provincial departments, those are significant cuts on a per capita basis for that period. So I think it's quite useful when we talk about division of revenue to contextualize the trajectory, what we've observed as a country since the beginning of the last period of fiscal expansion following the financial crisis and the expectations over the medium term. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Next slide, please. Good morning, honorable chairs and members. In terms of the structure of the division of revenue, the 67.2% national share includes conditional grants to provinces and local government, the general fuel levy shared with metropolitan municipalities, debt service costs, the contingency reserve, and provisional allocations. The provincial share amounts to 28.4% of the main budget expenditure, and the local government share is 4.4% of the main budget expenditure. Next slide. Subsequent to the initial division of nationally raised revenue, a portion of the national share is further divided amongst provincial government and municipalities. This division results in a remaining share of 49.6% for the national sphere, 41% to provinces, and 9.1% to municipalities. Of the 41% to provinces, the equitable share amounts to 82.2% and provincial conditional grants 17.8%. Of the 9.1% share to local government, the equitable share amounts to 58% and the conditional grants 31.9%. Metros also receive part of the fuel levy, which amounts to 10.2% of the local government share. Also to note is that the division of revenue is not a total reflection of local government spending because they also collect their own revenue. Next slide. So members, as indicated, the 67.2% allocated towards the national sphere of government is further divided, and then 69% of the national share is transferred to other spheres of government and institutions. The table shows the departments that transfer above 50% of their share of the nationally raised revenue. Some of the biggest amounts are transferred by corporate governance, which amounts to 95%, higher education 91%, human settlements, for example, is a transfer 97%, social development, I missed that one, is 99%, almost 100%, and transport transfers 97.9% of their share to other spheres of government and institutions. Next slide. Members, this slide only shows the transfers from national to provinces and local government. 11.5% is transferred to provinces in the form of conditional grants and 12.8% to municipalities, which includes the local government equitable share and conditional grants. Provinces receive 34.7% when we also include the provincial equitable share. Next slide. The total funding of 682.5 billion